Right now, NVIDIA semiconductors are at a pretty big point. I would argue you're at the apex of your breakout potential when we look at the rest of the stock market. NVIDIA pushing back into 135, Broadcom breaking out as well. You have all these new chip deals, but at the forefront of this, you have the big concern, the elephant in the room, right? Donald Trump and his tariffs. Now, I'm going to discuss some deals that are in place right now, and I'm going to discuss the biggest opportunities across the board. We have a smaller cap name as well, mid cap, I would say, that's moving also. And in my opinion, these are your biggest opportunities when we look at semiconductors as a whole. I still think NVIDIA is the best name overall. You know, if I had to pick one name to go long on, it would be NVIDIA every day of the week. Nothing, they've only gotten more valuable. But today, Trump was talking about his reciprocal tariffs and what he's going to be doing there. And he did vaguely mention chips, and chips didn't really move, which isn't a bad thing. But still, this is something that we have to be paying attention to. So Trump has put a 10% tariff on Chinese imports due to the country's role in the production of the opioid fentanyl. He also has ready tariffs on Canada and Mexico, America's two largest trading partners. Now, it's worth mentioning, those have been put off so far. He was talking about executing those immediately. They reached a little bit of middle ground. They're waiting for another month. We'll see what happens then. We'll go more into that, but that won't really affect chips. Okay? America's two largest partners. That could take effect in March after being suspended for 30 days. On top of that, on Monday, he removed exemptions from his 2018 steel and aluminum tariffs. He also mused about new tariffs on computer chips and pharmaceutical drugs. This is one of the big interesting parts. And if you're interested in HIMs, this could be big into those as well. So looking right now at chips, this is the one area that you're not going to be able to predict what's going to happen, because if you know how to predict what Donald Trump is thinking as far as tariffs, then please send me an email. Okay, link should be down somewhere down below as well. So this is the bad potential case for semis. Now, everything else I'm going to mention is all good news of what's happening. Number one, you have NVIDIA earnings coming in on the 26th. That's going to be huge. That's going to be big. Very excited for NVIDIA's earnings. They're always pretty awesome. Now, you might not get the most incredible move off their earnings at all times, but let's just look at how they performed the past year. You look at their revenue, and that's what really tells you the story. A year ago, last February, 22 billion, 26 billion in May, 30 billion in August, and most recently in November, 35 billion. I think they're going to be putting up close to a $40 billion earnings report. We'll see. Now, does that get the stock exploding? Not necessarily. But where things get more interesting with NVIDIA is what's happening as far as their Blackwell chip. Because I think for the last year, the most important and the biggest driving force behind NVIDIA was Blackwell chip, Blackwell chip, Blackwell chip. And now they're full production. Sales are going out. We'll see if there's any, callbacks on what's happening with production, what's happening there. But so far, there hasn't been anything negative regarding it. And in my opinion, we'll see the overall sales number only uptick from this as well. This will also be a very big point as well for the fears that DeepSeek is putting out there. Now, we already know that Google, Amazon, Apple, Meta are all planning to spend more money than ever on chips. That didn't slow them down with their idea of viewpoint of what's happening from DeepSeek. Okay, so that was not a concern for them. So again, I still think expectations are hot. I think NVIDIA still looks really good. That's my personal opinion. Okay, so what you're looking at there overall. Now, before I jump into other names as well, I'm going to go into the chart here on NVIDIA as well. I want this to be really clear because I think sometimes we get confused with what's the most important thing across the board. And so this is just the Nasdaq 100, and I just want to go over like your top 10 holdings, right? Your top 10 holdings in the Nasdaq. Apple, which, go figure, NVIDIA number 2, Microsoft, Amazon, Broadcom. Now, they will rebalance these names. This is important to understand. This gets rebalanced often, okay? So for the time being, it's important to understand what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. And I think this name right here, Broadcom, doesn't get talked about enough because it's had a monster past 2 years as well. And you look at what's happening here. So we'll go really quick as well into Broadcom, but let's look at NVIDIA because I've been telling you guys this might be the biggest opportunity that you've had as of recent. Now, I will say, back in August, it was a pretty good opportunity at $94. We were screaming it, but we're not going to talk about the past. We're going to talk about what's going to happen going forward. But if you look, you haven't held below your 200 daily moving average, this yellow line, since January 11th, 2023, right? So the fact that you were even touching it was crazy. Now, you did get a hold below it, but you got right back above it. And I think right now, you are at an inflection point overall for NVIDIA as well. So you're back. This green line is your 100 daily moving average, which you've touched a few times. but you can also see it's acted as a resistance and as a support. So in the shorter term, the 2-hour chart, what I'm looking at here is, can we start holding back above 135.10, 135.20, which is where we're at right now. I do think we're going to get the hold, and once you get above this, I think you're really pushing for a push back into 141, 142. Now, the other one I mentioned was Broadcom. And again, it's interesting that Broadcom doesn't get mentioned a lot, because if you look at the run that it had, from 2022, you've gone from $57 to $232 as of right now at all-time highs. You're at $252. If I look at this name, on paper, the growth is very similar to what NVIDIA did as a whole. Maybe not as good, but one tier below it. So why isn't this on the same page? It's even a top 5 holding in the Nasdaq, yet we don't discuss it enough. And I would argue as of recently, it's doing a little bit better in the short term, right? It's performing a little bit better. So I think Broadcom is another name that you have to be watching, and it is on the verge of a breakout. Your dip that you just had on the 27th from your most recent big drop with the tariffs and all that announced, you dipped down to 195 and you're already back up to 235, 233 right now. Just a testament to how strong these names really are. And again, this is what's really carrying the Nasdaq. The other point that I'll make here as well is the Nasdaq is on the verge of breaking back into all-time highs. Isn't it interesting that ES, the S&P 500, and Dow have made all-time highs, but Nasdaq is the one that's been lagging behind so much? It's because of semiconductors that have been consolidating for this whole time. When semiconductors start to explode, which I believe will happen once again, it's perfectly in line with what's happening here with the Nasdaq if you compare Broadcom and you compare NVIDIA's chart to these as well. So again, more viewpoints of what's happening, that buyers are getting aggressive. You have mid-caps running really well, but I think NVIDIA and semiconductors are also heating up. One thing that we have to pay attention to is what's coming out of the Trump administration regarding semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. As long as we don't see heavy chip tariffs, I think you're in a really good position. It's also worth mentioning, these companies are starting to move back into America and to get that in-house and kind of preparing for what's going to happen here as well. I think Trump is going to try to give them some time there also. Now, the one company that's a mid-cap in this sector that I think doesn't get discussed enough, it's extremely bullish, is ARM. They had earnings recently, they dipped, and today you had more really good news out of their camp as well. And this is where things get really interesting. So if you don't know, they just signed a deal literally like an hour ago, or they just announced their deal with Meta. And so ARM as well, you look at the chart first, looking there, just giving you that visual of what's happening. ARM, it was a IPO back in 2023, had a really good run. You kind of consolidated, pushing back up now. So ARM still looks really solid. Market cap, etc., still pretty small in comparison to some of these competitors. 171 billion, not tiny per se, but still in comparison to like a name like NVIDIA, AVGO, it has a lot of room to grow. Now, I will say most of ARM's money, the revenue, comes in from their deal with iPhones and different cells. Now, what they're doing here with Meta puts them in competition with some of the big boys. It's worth mentioning, NVIDIA had a deal to buy these guys back in 2021, 2020. Actually, it might have been 2020. I think it was 2021, actually. 2020, 2021. That's when they had the rights to buy it, and then it got blocked. All that stuff happened. But now ARM is in the works, and they're growing fast. They are growing pretty rapidly. Now, this will put them, again, like I said, in competition with names like NVIDIA, Broadcom, AMD. And it's worth mentioning, the only two names that I mentioned there that are really growing significantly are Broadcom and NVIDIA. The other companies haven't figured out how to scale with NVIDIA and AVGO. And that's why I think ARM has that opportunity. Because if any other company can show any type of growth potential like NVIDIA and AVGO, you will get big growth. So again, the fact that they're doing this, in my opinion, is huge. You saw ARM get a nice bounce off this. Am I saying to buy it right now? No. I do think around 157, it's a buying opportunity. But I will say here, when you're buying ARM, you have to buy with a longer term thesis. I'm not buying in the short term expecting immediate results, because you're going to see news like this pop off. So I hate to mention an option directly on it, but it still is one of those names that I think you have to discuss and have to be watching like a hawk, because it has massive upside potential in the short, medium, and long term. At every single scale, it has me excited. So again, definitely be watching it. And again, like, they're not doing the deal with a small team. They're doing the deal with Meta. And it's worth mentioning as well that This could lead to other partnerships with Meta as well. Like I said, they're already working on the sell side of things. If Meta can get their glasses down as well, this could lead to ARM working directly with those projects and their other projects as far as Oculus and et cetera, and everything else they're doing there. So this is definitely a step in the right direction for ARM and what you want to see. Now, again, I still think NVIDIA is top dog. I'm not discrediting that. I still think it's a beast. I love Jensen. I love everything about him. Broadcom, second dog. Third one, up and comer, I think is ARM. I think you have to be focused, have to have it on the top of your watch list as far as mid-caps semiconductors are concerned. If you have any questions, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Also, too, guys, I recommend following on Twitter so you get all my updates, everything in between. When it comes to my charts, I'm always posting throughout the day there, updates for YouTube, everything in between. I try to make sure you are always up to date. And I try to go more in detail from these videos on there as well with updates. So again, if you have questions, comment down below. I'll see you next time. Have a good one, traders.